Welcome back to the Packet Lab. Today we're going to take a look at Cisco command history, or this could easily be rewritten as the Cisco history command. Cisco IOS stores exec commands, and we'll see also configuration commands, in a buffer that is accessible via the show history command. By default, 10 commands are stored, and we'll see also that your mileage will vary based on iOS version and possibly platform with that as well. By default, 10 commands are stored, but you can set this value from anything from 0, which basically disables the history buffer, up to 256 commands. Now, many of you have probably used the history buffer without actually knowing that you're utilizing it, and that's when you're on the CLI and you want to see a previously issued command. You use the up arrow or the Control-P as the keyboard shortcut for that to see commands that you've previously entered. You can use Control-N or the down arrow to scroll the other way as well. But many people aren't aware that you can issue the show history command and see the full list of previous commands. Like I said, you can set the history size buffer from 0 to 256. The interesting thing is you can do this from either exec mode with the terminal history size command, or from configuration mode with the history size command. In configuration mode, you're actually going to configure this under a specific line or set of lines, in the case of the VTY lines. So you'd use the console line, the VTY lines, or the auxiliary line to set the history size there. And what's very cool with this command is that you're going to see a command history that's specific to the mode that you're currently in, whether that's exec mode or configuration mode. So if you're in exec mode and you're issuing ping, show IP int brief, commands like that, when you do show history, you're going to see a list of the commands that you issued from exec mode. So you won't see, if you went into configuration mode, you'll see conft, but you won't see any configuration commands. On the other hand, when you're in configuration mode, if you issue the show history command, and to do this you'll have to issue do show history. The do command basically allows you to launch an exec command from configuration mode. So you issue the do show history command, you're going to see configuration commands. You're going to see like no IP domain lookup, internet fast 0/0, IP address, blah blah blah. You won't see exec command. So it's pretty cool, especially in config mode. It's really nice to have that list of command history available. And the asterisk down here just says may vary by iOS version and platform. When we're looking at this today, the default is actually going to be 20 on the emulated routers that we're going to be using. So just keep that in mind. Jump on the soapbox real quick. You've heard this a billion times. If Cisco says the default is 10 in their documentation, the default's 10. Even if I show you that it's different, or you see that it's different, for examination purposes, be sure to go with what they have in their documentation. Their documentation does say 10 commands is the default. Like I said, you probably use the command history without knowing it via the up arrow and the down arrow. And basically, up arrow brings up the history buffer in a backward sequence. So if you up arrow, you're going to see the last command that you issued. If you down arrow, it's going to be recalling them in successive, more recent commands. And actually, that's only going to be available if you've already pretty much up arrowed, because you'll have to be somewhere in the command history to use the down arrow. Control-N and Control-P, I don't use those, but you may want to be aware of those, that those are the keyboard shortcuts for the up arrow and down arrow. And if you're not using an ANSI compatible terminal emulator, then you will need to use those rather than the up and down arrows. But to see the entire command history buffer, you just issue the show history or do show history from configuration mode, and you'll see here, we're in exec mode, we do a show history, and we see here basically the last 3 commands that I've run, including the show history command. You can see that I did a show IP interface brief, show running configuration for serial 0/0, and it doesn't have the full commands. It has exactly what you typed, and sometimes when you type in just garbage, it'll also have that in it. So you put in snooky pants or boobly boo, it will show up here even though it's not a valid command. The history buffer is set by default, and according to Cisco, the default is 10 commands. So you can actually tweak this from anywhere from 0, which effectively disables it, up to 256 commands, and you could do that either from configuration mode under the lines, or you can do it from exec mode via the terminal history size. And the reason we use terminal history size is because the history buffer is actually assigned on a per TTY line basis, which is actually pretty interesting. So if you have multiple connections to the router, so you have 3 users that are connected via telnet, they're coming in through the VTY lines, each of those users can set their own specific history buffer size. So you could have user 1 wants 20 lines, user 2 wants 200, and user 3 says I don't want to deal with this at all, and either turns it off or sets it to 0. And we'll see an example of that when we get on the CLI. So you can see here from exec mode, you use a terminal history size, and then you can set it from 0 to 256. In this case, we set it to 69. And you can verify what the history size is set to using the show terminal command. Show terminal will give you a lot of output. So in this case, we're piping it and we're just including the line that has history. And remember, this is case sensitive. We would have caught it with either a lowercase h or an uppercase h, but it says history is enabled. Good to know. And then the history size is the 69 that we just set it to. So that's one way to verify it. Okay, with all these commands, there's actually going to be a command that's available to you in exec mode and a corresponding command that's available in configuration mode. This will be a little bit of a review from the last slide because we are going to show you the terminal history size from the exec mode again. But when you're in configuration mode, this is not a global setting. You just don't go in and type history size, 256, and that would be the history size for all users. You set it under the line. So in this case, we're setting it under the console line. You can set it under the VTY line and the auxiliary line as well. So you get under there, and it's the same options, history size 0 through 256, and then you just set the history size. In this case, we set it to 100. So then we break out of that, go into exec mode, and we're going to use our kind of hacked verification command. And we can see here that the history size is set to 100. Well, I guess it's a little bit different than the last slide. This is the same command I showed you in the last slide, that from exec mode you can set the history size, and here we're saying, terminal history size 69, which we just did. But what's interesting here, and we'll see this on the CLI, but this is on the same router that we have the history size set to 100 for the console line. We're using the console line here. This will be better visible on the CLI itself. But you can see here it's overridden the history size of 100 with the exec mode specification of 69. You can override the default history size for your line. The one exception, we'll see this in a later slide, is if it is disabled on the line, you will not be able to override that with a different size. But as we will see, you can actually override the no history command. So if it was disabled on the console line, you can go ahead and issue the terminal history command from exec mode and override that. Okay, and this slide shows you the difference of the command history, basically the show history command in exec versus configuration mode. And I touched on this earlier. When you're in exec mode and you issue the show history command, it's going to show you the exec commands. So this makes sense, including show history, which I think is funny. But here we don't see any configuration commands, even though at this point I actually gone into configuration terminal command and done some configuration. So you only see exec level commands. On the other hand, when we're in config mode, which we can see by this config, you have to do, so make sure you do that. Do show history. We can see we don't see any exec commands. We don't see any of these commands. We do see the configuration commands. So you can see, line VTY04, blah, blah, blah. These are all configuration commands. What's nice about this is if you're configuring multiple routers or you're doing something you're going to have to repeat over and over again, go ahead, do your configuration. If it's less than 10 lines, you're going to be fine. Otherwise, set your history buffer size to however many commands you think you're going to need. Then go ahead, do your configuration. When you're done with it, just issue the do show history command, and then you can just cut and paste this. You can go ahead back, grab these lines, cut them, paste them into another router if you want, into a text file, whatever. But it's pretty nice because then you can just paste those into the next router. And you'll use this a lot, especially if you're doing CCIE labs or you're prepping a bunch of routers for just basic router configuration. I have a number of commands that I generally do, and if I'm setting up routers, especially in a lab situation, I'll go configure them on one router, go ahead and do show history, grab them and just paste them on the other ones.